Hi everyone, it's Jacqueline. Today we're going to be thinking about how to achieve that level 7 for history. And IB history is the hardest subject to achieve a level 7, or one of the hardest subjects to achieve a level 7. You have only about, maybe 2 to 3% of students who sit the IB exam will actually come out with a 7 for history. So today I've got 5 tips to share with you to hopefully increase your chances of being able to attain that elusive 7. So tip number 1, answer the question. Okay, it seems obvious, but I can promise you so many people fail to do this in the exam. So as an example, let's say you have the question, to what extent did economic factors contribute to the emergence of 2 authoritarian states, each from a different region? Okay, so it's a to what extent question. It's asking about economic factors. You have to talk about 2 authoritarian states, and they have to come from different regions. So there's a lot, actually there are a lot of places where you could go wrong here. You might fail to answer the to what extent side of the question. I have seen students before who argue basically, yes, economic factors did contribute to the emergence of 2 authoritarian states. And they make that hard argument, and that is the whole argument. And you can't do that in a to what extent question. You have to consider the other side. So you're going to have to introduce another factor. Of course, there's also the chance of not answering the question if you do not focus mainly on economic factors. Economic factors are the factors given in the question, therefore the majority of your essay should be focusing on that. Another way you could fail to answer the question, if you fail to talk about 2 authoritarian states, that one is perhaps harder to do, or harder to fail at. And also if you talked about 2 authoritarian states from the same region, you also wouldn't be answering the question. So, for example, you couldn't write an essay on Hitler and Mussolini for this question because they both are from Europe. So a possible approach to ensure that you address the question would be to structure your argument or your essay as follows. Paragraph 1, you would talk about how economic factors contributed to the emergence of authoritarian leader 1, let's say Hitler. Then paragraph 2 would focus on how economic factors contributed to the emergence of authoritarian leader 2, let's say Mao, because he is from a different region from Hitler. And then paragraph 3, you would consider another factor. So let's say social factors, okay? How social factors contributed to the emergence of Hitler and Hitler and Mao, your 2 authoritarian leaders. Tip number 2, impress the examiner with your accurate and relevant knowledge. So, if you are writing about how Hitler and how economic factors contributed to his emergence, then you have to give specific, accurate, and relevant examples. So here is a specific, accurate, and relevant example. The Great Depression of 1929 contributed to the emergence of Hitler because Germany was severely affected by the Depression, owing to their reliance on US loans through the Dawes and Young plans. By 1932, unemployment in Germany had reached a peak of 6 million people. So this is specific because I'm mentioning key dates, 1929, 1932. I'm mentioning, key facts, 6 million people. So it's very specific. It's accurate because these are the facts, and they're relevant, of course, because they are related to the economic factors that contributed to Hitler's rise to power. Tip number 3, impress the examiner with the ability to critically analyze evidence. So let's say your evidence is unemployment had reached 6 million in Germany by 1932. So there's your fact. How do you critically analyze the evidence you've presented? So here is an example. High unemployment contributed to the rise of Hitler because he made promises to give the German people bread and work. However, the working classes never voted for the Nazi Party en masse, as they were far more likely to support the communists. Therefore, the extent to which high unemployment in Germany aided Hitler is often overstated. Now, it may sound like I'm kind of contradicting myself here. I want to argue that economic factors contributed to Hitler's emergence. And then I'm saying, oh, but actually, maybe they didn't. Or at least this factor has been, overstated. I'm not contradicting myself. I'm not saying economic factors are unimportant. I'm saying that they have been, in the historiography, something that is arguably overstated because actually, the unemployed or the workers in Nazi Germany, the lower classes, were more likely to vote for the communists. This is showing the ability to think critically and to question the arguments that have been put forward by other historians in the past, and yes, even question my own argument in a sense, but the argument still stands. Economic factors played a part, an important part, in Hitler's emergence. Okay, tip number 4. Impress the examiner with your knowledge of historiography. So I mentioned that a second ago. Historiography, what is it? Well, it is essentially what historians have written about the topic in the past. So in historiography, you find historians debating with one another. One historian will argue economic factors are the most important factor in Hitler's emergence. Other historians will say, no, it was the political factors that were crucial in Hitler's rise to power. So that is the historiographical debate. Let's say you're writing on Hitler's rise to power. You could introduce the debate surrounding a German Sonderweg. So if you haven't come across this term before, Sonderweg just means special path. So it's the idea that Germany was on a special path, different from the rest of Europe at the time in the 20th century. And, therefore, Hitler's rise to power came about because of the special path that Germany took through the 20th century. So you have historian William Scherer argues this in the 1960s. He argues that Nazism, and therefore Hitler's rise to power, was a logical phase in Germany's development, as Germany, was on a special path, or Sonderweg. So this perspective downplays the important role played by economic factors or the circumstances that allowed Hitler to come to power. So you can see there how what has been done is a piece of historiography has been introduced. I have mentioned William Scherer. I've even mentioned he's writing in the 1960s. I've mentioned what his argument is. And then I haven't just left it there. I have gone on to relate it to my overall argument, to the overall question, which is about economic factors, and how this perspective downplays the important role played by economic factors. So there again, you have this debate happening within the essay. So that's a really nice thing to be able to include. Final tip 5, make sure you argue to a consistent conclusion. So your argument should be clear from your introduction, and you should reinforce it in every single paragraph and your conclusion. So in every single paragraph of your essay, I should know what the argument is. So if you say that economic conditions were the most significant factor in Hitler's rise to power in your introduction, make sure that is clear throughout your essay. Don't change your argument as you go along. So yes, introduce new perspectives. Introduce the fact that maybe economic factors have been overstated. but always come back round to say, despite the fact they have been overstated, they are still arguably the most significant factor in Hitler's rise to power. Okay, so those are the 5 tips for getting a 7. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover in upcoming videos, let me know as well in the comments section. I hope this is helpful for you, and best of luck.